In LO5 we're going to study the 4 biomolecules of life, and I've actually split this into 2 sections, so LO5 has part 1, LO6 has part 2. Basically what we're looking at here, just your brief overview, you have nothing to write yet, is all living things are made out of 4 big molecules: carbs, nucleic acids, proteins, and lipids. And when I say big, I mean that they're made out of relatively large molecules compared to other things. We can break each of these down into its units and study the units or study these molecules as a whole, because remember, a molecule is one or more pieces put together. So, introduction here, these are all carbon-based molecules. Anything that's considered alive has carbon in it, is very carbon-based. That's how we use radioactive dating to find out how old fossils and things are. We look at the carbon and through some chemistry how far it's decayed, and we can use math and calculate how old something is. All living things have these carbon molecules in them. All living things have carbohydrates, nucleic acids, proteins, and lipids. These 4 molecules are made out of something called monomers. Think about, don't even worry about the picture at the bottom right now, just look at the necklace here. As a whole, we have a necklace. That's going to be like a polymer when we're looking at these molecules. What's the necklace made out of? It's made out of beads that repeat. It's made out of simple units that are repetitive. Those are monomers that we're going to be looking at as we go through these 4 molecules. So these molecules all have simple units, monomers, that make them up. So a carbohydrate, we'll look at what it's made of, what it's called when you look at the little pieces, what it's called when you look at the necklace, in quotes, as a whole. Same with proteins, nucleic acids, and lipids. So a monomer is the building block of a complex molecule. A carbohydrate, we have complex carbohydrates, we have simple carbohydrates. Proteins are very complex molecules. They're going to be made out of little beads, not literally, but structures that repeat. As a whole, the large molecule that we look at that has these repeating units is called a polymer. So down at the bottom, we have starch, a part of starch. Think potatoes are very starchy. Starch is made out of glucose monomers. If you look, this picture here shows glucose. If you hook up lots of glucose one after the other, lots of monomers, you end up with this big molecule, this polymer, called starch. So we're going to look at each of these 4 separately. First, we're going to study carbs. Carbs are made out of only 3 atoms. They're made out of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. You can abbreviate it in your notes, CHO, if you remember what that means, but if not, you should write out carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. One little carbohydrate piece, one monomer, is called a monosaccharide. So the picture to the right gives you an example of a monosaccharide. If I took lots and lots of monosaccharides and hooked them up, so if I took this picture and just copied it end to end to end and made a long chain, I'd be making a polysaccharide. Poly means many, mono means one. Carbs in bodies are used for energy. So if you're in sports, you may have carbo-loaded before a big game. Energy, and then some is structural. Examples, we have simple sugars, which tend to be made out of monomers, maybe 1 or 2 pieces hooked up. Glucose, galactose, sucrose, there's tons more. Our complex, our polymers, our very, very long chain carbohydrates would be starch, cellulose, glycogen, and there are others. So this is one example of a very important biomolecule in your body. We looked at what it's made of, its monomers, its beads, and its polymers. When you string lots of those beads together, you get a polysaccharide. Let's look at another group in bodies. In every living thing, we have nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are made out of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. One piece of a nucleic acid, one little bead on a necklace, is called a nucleotide. In this picture to the right, I am circling right now one nucleotide. Here's another one. Here's another one. If you string up lots of nucleotides together, you get a polymer called a nucleic acid. The most famous nucleic acid in your body is DNA. Nucleic acids are used to store and transmit genetic information, and as I mentioned, we have DNA, and we also have another molecule called RNA that we'll look at later. Now, I'm going to stop right there in this video. In the next one, I'm going to come back to proteins, and I'm going to come back to lipids. What your job is now, I have a really neat video. It's a TED Talk, if you ever heard of those, just like 4 minutes long or so, and it goes through monomers and polymers, but not in this sort of detail. It talks about how polymers are important to real life, how you see them in the world all around you. So I'm going to have you watch that video, jot down a couple things about it, and then come back to LO6 and we'll continue on proteins and lipids and what those are made out of, what they're used for, etc.